Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the North Brunswick Township Board of Education. If we could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Brockman.
Here.
Mr. Duran Harris.
Here.
Ms. James.
Here.
Ms. Keefe.
Here.
Mr. Ligori.
Here.
Dr. Patel.
Here.
Ms. Toth. Mr. Wen.
Here.
And Ms. Zulik.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Hawk. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the Open Public Meetings Law, the public notice of this meeting, which included the time, date, and location, was distributed by 3 p.m. on Thursday, March 2nd, 2022, in the following manner. Posted on the bulletin board reserved for announcements in the board office, 25 Linwood Place, North Brunswick, mailed to the Home News Tribune, Sentinel, and the clerk of the Township of North Brunswick, and delivered to the 9 duly elected board members. And at this time, I'll pass it over for our presentations.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everybody. We are very much looking forward to having the principals present their school data presentations this evening. I have asked the principals to tell the story of their school. Last month, our Director of Accountability and Specialist Programs, Mercy Chang, presented on district assessment data. This evening, our principals are here to put a face on it and really provide more context, school by school. Each principal will be sharing areas of strength and things that they've noticed, as well as next steps. Remember not to get hung up on the slides with specific data, because this was shared last month, but rather focus on hearing the big picture story about each school, how recovery of learning lost has been progressing in that school from what is seen on the ground, and what steps the school is taking to continue that work. Mr. Neller, our high school principal from North Brunswick Township High School, will kick things off with a special presentation first on the NJGPA 11th grade test and the graduation rate. And the remote control is there for you, Mr. Neller.
Do I have to talk into the mic? Yeah.
You can hold it.
All right, good evening. I want to thank the Board of Ed for inviting us here tonight to talk about what we're seeing with the test scores in our building. It's my honor to start tonight with our graduation rate, because it is something we're very proud of at the high school, something we've worked very hard to improve over the last few years. So the state of New Jersey in 2011 introduced an adjusted cohort, and basically what it said was there's a 4-year cohort and a 5-year cohort which determines the school's graduation rate. So the 4-year cohort is, if you have to imagine that you have a freshman class that comes into the building, and this is why we always tell freshmen, everything you do from the second you start high school counts, because those students that entered our high school count as part of our graduation rate, no matter if they move, drop out, leave, and we don't know where they went. Unverified students. At the end, after 4 years, the state takes that number, any additional students that moved in over the time, and they divide it by the number of students who did not reach graduation, and that's our graduation rate. So it's a big challenge for us to keep track of all those students, because not only do we have to worry about how they're doing in our school, but if they move to places like Franklin, New Brunswick, we have to make sure they actually enrolled there, because if they don't, then they count against our graduation rate if they don't graduate, even if they graduated from there. Because sometimes schools will enroll students and give them different ID numbers, state ID numbers. So sometimes we lose kids that way that graduate, but because their ID numbers were changed, they count against us. So it's a lot of work that we have to put in to make sure we do that. The state also calculates the 5-year graduation rate, so it'll tell you after 5 years how many of the non-grads came back and got a diploma, even though they didn't graduate within the 4 years. All right. So I think I just explained all this to you.
We can move on.
So going back before the class of 2019, in 2017, I was the assistant principal for that class. In that class, we kind of say it was where we hit the low point. We had, at that point, only 79.4% of our students graduated that year. They were an interesting group over 4 years, and I was their assistant principal, but they had a very low graduation rate, and at that point, we were the third lowest graduation rate in Middlesex County. And when I became principal, I swore that we were going to improve our graduation rate, that we have a great school, and that was an embarrassing number, and we were never going to allow that to be repeated again. So beginning in the class of 2018, we improved their graduation rate by 10%. So we went from, in 1 year, from 79% to 89%. And then you can see, beginning with the class of 2019, we have maintained a graduation rate of over 90%, which puts us in the upper middle of Middlesex County high school graduation rates. The supports for student success, and first of all, I have to thank the Board of Education, because without your support, we would have not been able to do all the things we've done over the last couple of years to give students more opportunities to graduate on time. So we have a credit recovery program for seniors. If a senior fails a class, and right now we're collecting that data for the first marking period, we give them an opportunity to pass that class by attending a Saturday credit recovery program. They still have to do work. They go back online and they have to complete coursework from the first marking period that they did not complete during this past marking period, to give them an opportunity to bring their grade to passing. And we do that throughout the year, all 3 marking periods. And in the 4th marking period, we monitor them closely, but they have to rise to the occasion and do it themselves. We have a summer credit recovery program the last few years, where we've brought students in over the summer to earn back credits that they've lost. We have in this year, we had 75 students come to that program. We have Apex online coursework. So sometimes we have kids who come, for instance, a couple years ago, we had a student who came from New York State. She was a senior, and she had never taken US 1 and US 2. I don't know why in her school she didn't, but she needed those 2 courses because the state of New Jersey says you cannot graduate high school if you don't take US 1 and you don't take don't pass US 1 and US 2. So we were able to put her online, and she completed those outside of school hours, and she was able to earn a diploma and graduate. So we utilized online coursework, and right now we have about 30 students online that are recouping credits that way. We've also really grown our ESL and our bilingual courses. Unfortunately, a lot of times in the past, once a student graduated from ESL, they were put in classrooms and they were expected to succeed, and sometimes there still is a little bit of a language gap. So we've developed a lot of courses for those students that they get support they need throughout the rest of the time that they're at the high school. And I can honestly say I don't have the data with me tonight, but we have drastically improved our ESL graduation rates over the last few years. And lastly, we've created our Road to Success, our alternative school. And again, without the support of the Board of Ed, we would not have that program. Every year, we have 30 students enrolled in that program. This year, there are 20 seniors. And with confidence, we can say that we know that 19 of the 20 are definitely going to finish. Some of them are going to finish before Christmas. We give them an opportunity. Again, they have a hybrid learning model where they're partially online, but there are teachers who work with them in small groups, and the goal is to get them on track. And sometimes they're just students, for whatever reason, walking around their building for 8 periods a day didn't work for them. And sometimes they struggled in classes, and then as a result, their behavior is starting to act out. So we give them an environment where it's less stress, it's less high pace, but they get the opportunities to work throughout the day with teachers and a social worker, and we have had a tremendous success rate with helping those students to graduate. And then once those students graduate, that we believe will graduate in December, we'll bring some other students in who we think may need that support for the rest of the year. So last year, the state of New Jersey changed the state they were going to change the state graduation requirement until Governor Murphy waived the test for last year. But if you remember, and I remember growing up, there was always a junior year test that you took to determine if you were ready to graduate high school. And then the state for a while went to the PARCC testing and the NJSLA testing, where they were testing students in grades 9 and 10. But last year, in the midst of coming back from COVID and students being out of school for almost 2 years, the state decided they were going to test students on NJSLA, start strong, NJSLA, and then still give the juniors a new graduation test called the NJGPA. So I do believe that the students at MBTHS had testing fatigue last year when they took many of these assessments, because I feel like the state hammered high schools last year. So the juniors, this test assessment was introduced in 2021. It is supposed to replace the former high school graduation requirement, which is the HESQA. 750 is generally the cut score for passing for NJSLA. They wanted to keep the same cut score for NJGPA, which caused a lot of controversy throughout the state. And then ultimately, Governor Murphy decided to say that the student scores for last year didn't count, and it was just going to be a field test. All right, so if you look at the way the state breaks it down, again, 750 was passing. In language arts, the state average score was 736. We exceeded that average score. Our school average score was 744 for juniors taking the test last year. For the mathematics, our high school average score was the same, again, 744. The state average was a little higher last year, so we recognize that we have some work to do in math, but we feel, again, where we're seeing the greatest struggle among students during COVID was in their math classes. Online learning and math did not go very well together, and I think we recognize that, and we're working to improve that. So the next steps for NJGPA, so as I mentioned, the current class of 2023's testing requirement was waived. Those students actually have no testing requirement for this year. So they will graduate based on their credits only this year. So, and we don't know yet what it's going to look like for future grades because they never announce it until the spring. We continue to provide MBTHS students with multiple opportunities to show that they are graduation ready. Even if the NJGPA says they're not, they still get the opportunity to take the PSAT, the SAT, which is the high stakes test, and the ASVAB, which is the military test, which is known to be extremely difficult. And those students, if they earn passing grades on those exams, they can achieve their graduation requirement without ever having to pass NJSLA or NJGPA. And then we do have, for students who struggle, a portfolio process. And over the years, we've never had one student not graduate because of portfolio. They have all passed. So we work closely with them to make sure that they complete the tasks that show that even though they may not be a strong test taker, they're ready to graduate. As we learn more about NJGPA, our teachers will implement strategies and activities to prepare students for the test. And this year we're incorporating our NJTSS data teams, and we're beginning to meet to develop our school-wide Tier 1 interventions to support students in their math, their English, and their science, and their social studies classes. So that'll be coming up in the next few weeks. All right, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neller. Any questions from the board on the high school graduation numbers as well as the NJGPA? All right, Mr. Neller gets to come back up in a little while. I think Mrs. Kingsley, are you first with John Adams?
Yes. I believe I am.
Okay, let me go get that prep for you. The remote's right there. Okay.
While we're waiting, we'll just say good evening, board members, President Harris and everybody else, thank you so much. Community members, Mrs. Shiroka, obviously, Mrs. Kita, Mrs. Hawk, and my fellow principals.
And our millions of viewers.
And as you used to say, right, and millions of viewers, yes, exactly. Okay, so, as Mr. Neller mentioned, and the score is 750, that's what we're looking for. And so if you can see, this is the, all of the scores in language arts and in math for John Adams. So the first column is.
Excuse me, do you mind holding the mic? It's probably easier for them to hear clearly.
Sure, absolutely.
Just a learning curve there.
Okay, so if you look at the numbers, we did not achieve proficiency, but, you know, we have 749 and 748 in 3 things, so we are very close. And I have to say, even though I hate blaming the pandemic, I'm very proud of our students and our teachers, because I do think that those numbers under the circumstances are very, very good. You can compare them with the state and with the district, and in most cases, we have surpassed those scores. So I was very pleased with what went on. Okay, so like Mrs. Shiroka said, I believe you've seen this already, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about, you know, again, the levels 4 and 5 are the levels that the state considers proficient. Back in the day when the students took PARCC, there were only 3 levels, and the top 2 levels were considered proficient. Now there are 5 levels. I'm sure you've heard this, and only the top 2 levels. So
We like to repeat it.
yeah, I like to repeat it because, you know, the children are working very hard, the teachers are working very hard, but the state sometimes changes the rules on us, and we have to adjust, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to adjust to what they are doing. So I'll go through these quickly. I believe you did see these already. This is our 3rd grade language arts. This is our 4th grade language arts. So really, if you put the 2 last numbers in the last columns together, that's how many children are proficient. So you can see on this one, we have over 50% children proficient. This is our math for 3rd grade. And as Mr. Neller also said, these numbers are lower. And that was a little surprise to me, because John Adams and North Brunswick in general have been very good math students. I have found, I've been teaching the district, well, I'm not a teacher now, but I have taught for a long time. And I've been here for over 20 years, and I always found that the children performed better in math. So this was a little bit of a surprise, but I will talk in a little bit about what we're doing to make those numbers go up and for our students to perform better. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, and this is some of the things that we at John Adams noticed. My dean, my director, and the math and language arts coach went through the data with me, and these are some of the good things that we learned. We learned that that they are good at finding the meaning of words through context. This is especially true for the younger children, but older children do have illustrations, graphics, pictures in those books, and that they know how to use those to help them with the meaning that they're reading. That's in 3rd grade. In 4th grade, I was very pleased to see that they were able to determine the theme of a story, because theme can be a very difficult concept for children. They are able to refer to details when answering questions. And they are also able to use domain-specific words. So that would be like if you were, reading a book about music and words like rhythm and meter and things like that. Things that you might not know if you were not familiar with that topic. In math, they were good about certain kinds of graphs. They were very good dividing and multiplying fluently within 100. And they were also good at understanding the products of whole numbers written in different ways. For example, arrays, multiplication, and things like that, so that they could come up with answers. The last thing for 4th grade, they were good with some geometry, particularly angles, and they were also able to use the formulas for perimeter and area. That's something that they have been quite good at for many years, I have noticed, at least in John Adams. I'm going to go on and tell you about something that they did not do particularly well, and we're going to talk about that, and that was fraction equivalencies. Fractions seem to be always an issue for students, and not the fractions per se, but understanding this is a very basic concept, that 1/2 is equivalent to 2/4, and being able to represent that in different ways. So I'll talk about what we're going to do to help that kind of an issue and other issues that we found. So, oh, I don't know, did I just do something wrong? It's gone, the picture's gone.
Here it goes.
Oh, wait, there it is, okay. All
There you
right.
go.
It's very little print, I hope you can read it. I'm gonna just, since I just talked about math, I'm gonna go down to the math and I'll talk about that first. So some of the PD ideas is that we would like to review the standards for mathematical practices. Now, in the NJSLS standards, they're obviously what the children have to learn, but there is also how they have to learn that. And there are 8 mathematical practices, and they are things like making sense of problems and persevering to solve them, or they are modeling with mathematics. That's an important one because that would include things like everyday activities in math. Things that, like, you go to the grocery store and you use money, or you are asked to count how many kids are in the class, you know how many papers to get from the main office, things like that. So those are only 2 of the 8 standards, but that we think that that's important. We focus a lot on the standards themselves, but these mathematical practices are just as important. The next one, saying using support such as manipulatives for fractions and time. We didn't really see a big problem with time on anything. The problem is that time is not really in the curriculum that much. So we have put time into the curriculum so that children understand how to use time and how to understand time. A lot of them don't know how to use analog clocks. I'm not convinced that that's the end of the world because very little is analog at this point, right? Our phones are not analog, our computers are not analog. So I'm not really talking about that. I'm talking more about understanding that, if I need to get to this place by 5 o'clock and it takes me 25 minutes to get there, when do I have to leave? That kind of time situations. And again, the fractions are here. So there's some of the things that we need to go over with the teachers and some PD so that they can help the students. We also have learned that there are some topics that are not taught until later in the school year, sometimes right around the time they're taking the NJSLA, and obviously that they haven't been taught, and if it's a new concept or they don't remember from the previous year, they are not going to do particularly well. So what we are trying to do is go through the curriculum, find some of those things that are later, and not teach them, but bring them up in what we used to call number talks, but are now really called solve and share, which are just little bits of time at the beginning of the math lesson where it doesn't have to relate necessarily. It can relate to the lesson, or it can be something we have done before, or something that we want to just remind the students of. So it's just a few minutes at the beginning, and then we can get an idea. Do the children understand this? Yes, good. Maybe we don't have to go over it that much, or no, the children do not understand it. We need to spend a little bit more time and not wait until this is taught maybe in April or May when it might be too late. We do think that the children need manipulatives, for everybody, so that's something that we might look at when we do our budget for next year, maybe getting more manipulatives for students to use. Students have things like pattern blocks and unifix cubes and all kinds of things that they can count with, they can add with, they can just, decipher shapes with. So those are good things to have. These are some things that we are already doing. We always, because that's just our policy, have small group instruction. Small group instruction is obviously great for small groups of students and focusing in on sometimes individual goals or sometimes the goals of a couple of children within that grade level or in that classroom. So the teacher looks at the data, because I'm not the only one looking at the data, the teachers are also looking at the data, and they are determining either with NJSLA or Start Strong or their own assessments, which could simply be, write on a Post-it note how many sides Pentagon has, and then post it up there and you can go to lunch. That's a very quick way to figure out if they know something, but sometimes it's a much, much bigger kind of a thing, like an exam that they take. So they look at that, they find out what they need, and then they can work with those children and pull small groups to the back. We work with our math ASTs, or our academic support teachers. There's essentially one for every grade, but we really do try, if the kindergarten teacher has a little extra time because there aren't as many students, why can't she take a first grade group or a second grade group? So they are sort of assigned grades, but not always necessarily they can work with other students. And then the last thing is consulting with the math coach, and this is something that I did speak with the math coach, and I spoke with the faculty about recently about the fraction thing that I mentioned before. So that is something, that's a school goal, because many students did not do well on that. So we want to bring that into everything, not just the math class, but the art teacher talking about it when she's doing big pictures, and you're going to color half of this red, or you're going to color 1/4 purple, or you're going to fold your paper in half. When the music teacher, and I say this all the time, people know my son is a music teacher. I'm music illiterate, but I do know there's math. I know there's math in music. I'm embarrassed to say that I'm not good, but there is math in music. So when the music teachers are teaching music, they can certainly talk about things like, everybody can talk about fractions. It doesn't have to just be during a math lesson, and that's what we're trying to make one of our school goals, working with all of the staff, everybody, and the math coach, who I talk to frequently about this. So that's the math part of it. Now go back to the language arts part of it. We do think that, nonfiction comprehension has always been a problem. Children, not every child, but children tend to like fiction stories better. So things that have charts and graphics sometimes can be a little scary to some children. So that's something that we think would be a good PD opportunity. We also think that we need text, and I don't mean textbooks. I just mean text within science and social studies that will help them understand nonfiction, because they get a good bulk of their information, and it can be reading off the computer, it can be something that the teacher printed, it could be something that's on the smartboard that they are reading to learn about that. And then once again, the small group instruction, I did write that, like I said, that's for when a few children are having an issue, that's the perfect thing. And it's never the same group. It's always these 3 kids today, those 4 kids tomorrow, 2 of those kids and 1 of these kids from yesterday in this group. That's how they always work. And also consulting with our ELA coach so that she can help and guide the teachers, because both the coaches do spend a lot of time in the classroom. They are coaching the teachers, but certainly they are coaching them how to help the students. So we want them to understand what is going on. And that brings me to the end of my wonderful John Adams School. Does anybody have any questions for me?
No? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very
I
much, Mrs.
appreciate it.
Kingsley.
Thank you.
Mr. Patella from Judd, welcome.
I believe I'm next.
Let's see what happens when you hit that.
I would say, I just want to introduce myself, John Patella. It's a pleasure being the Judd School principal. I love coming to work every day. If you saw the students down the hallway, I mean, we're back. It's nice. We have our century paths. You see the kindergartners and first graders jumping around the hallway. I think some of them say, can I go to the bathroom, so they can go down the hallway on the century path. It's a real nice time. So I think things are going well. This is the time of year where we talk about assessments. And as Mrs. Troca will tell you, they're a small measure. It's a snapshot. What's most valuable are our teachers' interactions day to day with our students and what they see. However, we do utilize this. So all what we're talking about isn't based on that question on that day, because who knows how that student was doing that day? Who knows what was going on in their life? So it's the tool, but it's not the only game in town for us. What we also utilize is Link It. That's our tool for assessments, and also our beginning of the year assessments in ELA and math. So all those combined is directing some of our instruction. And so,
Got enough of that last month.
I'm going the wrong way. There you go.
you could take a look at that while I'm speaking here. What we're looking for is we have data teams looking at trends based on our assessment results. And that will help drive our instruction. Who's on the data teams? Our classroom teachers on the grade levels that we're looking at, our academic support teachers, our coaches who work with our teachers, our supervisors, and of course, the all-knowing principal. And I mention them all by name because you've all supported those positions to be as they are. We're very fortunate here in North Brunswick to have that army to work on behalf of our students. What do the data teams do? They examine and look for trends so that it can drive our instruction. What did we find, generally speaking, at Judd. ELA, where we need to focus in our writing is on grammar. In our reading, it's focusing on phonics. So we're going to meet, we're going to dissect, examine, review, and hone in on those focuses for our grades 1 through 4, even though these are grades 3 and 4 testing. In our math, our reasoning and critical thinking, and our math vocabulary. If you've all done word problems, you need some clues as to determine, is it subtraction, is it addition? So there are certain clues, certain terms that will determine to help students recognize what order of operation they're going to be doing the computations in. How are we going to address these findings? Well, as we're moving towards improving our Tier 1 instruction. So here we are trying to teach our curriculum and based on the standards. However, our students are in a certain place, and we find that out through our assessments. So we need to adjust our Tier 1 instruction, which is our whole class instruction. And that will determine who's also in our Tier 2 and Tier 3 groups. And our idea is to try to individualize instruction as much as possible. We're going to progress monitor and give students measurable goals. We feel what's measured is what's important. And so we're going to have measurable goals. We as administrators, along with some teachers, are going to do some walkthroughs to make sure what's going on in the classroom is what is what we've intended to go on. And our PLCs, our professional learning communities on each grade level is going to meet and hone in on our weaknesses as well. So we have a lot of things in place to attack where our weaknesses have been. And we're also going to, through you guys as well, we will have professional development opportunities as well to help our staff, help our students. So that's generally speaking what is going on at Judd. I want to thank you for your continued support, central office as well as the board, and I want you all to know that Judd is full of a dedicated staff who has students in their mind number one. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, John.
Next up is Mr. Dawson from Livingston Park.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. It's good to see everyone and happy to talk about what's happening at Livingston Park these days. In this slide, you see the overview of our overall school performance, and throughout the presentation, I suspect you'll hear some similar things that are happening in all of our schools across the district. You can see we are in the overall the 3 category, and of course we would like to be closer to proficiency and exceeding proficiency. When we look at our overall scores in 3rd grade ELA, this is how we stack up. The highest percentage for us was category 4 in this area. But in this slide, you can also see some of the areas where you can see an achievement gap that we are working to address in our school. And we'll talk about that in more detail in just a moment. These are our ELA scores in 4th grade. Again, the predominant score was a level 4 in that area, but you can see just look at the top row, 16, 23, 24, 32, and 4.6. Gives you an idea of the vast array of student needs in a given grade level. There are students well represented in each category there. And as a school, our job is to figure out how do we help each one of those students be successful. And not just be successful, but really reach their potential and challenge them to the best of our ability. Our scores in math are in this slide. This is 3rd grade. Predominant score is a level 3. And you can see similar achievement gap indications here. 4th grade, predominant score is 4. We still have a lot of work to do. So when we look at our school, what we notice is in 3rd grade, although our students have slightly outperformed the district average, there are achievement gaps that we're working on. Our school has a very high percentage of English language learners, and we've designed some interesting things that are starting to pay off in the district with the board support. The areas that we are most focused on right now are supports for ELL students, English language learners, as well as our students with learning disabilities. How can we do a better job serving them? So 5 years ago at Livingston Park, we started a dual language program. So in a dual language program, half of the students in the class speak English at home, the other half of the students in the class speak Spanish at home. The students receive 50% of their instruction in English, 50% of their instruction in Spanish. And the goal is for both of those groups of students to learn a second language. And what the research tells us is that that model of instruction is the most effective model for creating long-term academic growth in students who are learning English as a second language. It also has the benefit of allowing students to learn Spanish as a second language, and it serves as a very rigorous program for those students. And what the data tells us is that by around third grade, the achievement of those students starts to take off. And we were very pleased with the NJLSLA results this year. This was the first year a dual language cohort of students at LP and at Parsons took the exam. And curiously, what's happening at LP is that students in the dual language program, bear in mind they only learn in English 50% of the time, performed better on the English portion of the exam than students who are in the traditional program. Why is that? Students are learning not just how to speak a second language, but how to decipher language, how to look at a word in either language and break it down, look at prefixes, suffixes, examine for cognates, and it causes them to think on a deeper cognitive level, and that is starting to pay off. So one of the things we're looking at, and we'll get to in the next slide, is how do we make that program even better? In math, similar to what Mrs. Kingsley and Mr. Patella shared, there are certain areas our students are doing well in, and there are certain areas that we're noticing need broader support. Our students did well in Base 10, algebraic thinking. They needed help with fractions and modeling. We saw similar gaps in how ELL students performed and how students with learning disabilities performed. In ELA, fourth grade, our students did a little bit better than the average student within the district, but we're still noticing those achievement gaps that we need to address. We're not really satisfied until we notice all of our kids making progress. In fourth grade math, the score category 4 was the most common, but it's similar ideas. Fractions continue to be a challenge for us. Modeling expressions continues to be a challenge for us. And even in math, serving for students with English language learning needs is a big deal. When you think about the nuances of understanding the language of a word problem, for example, slight differences in wording can throw off students. So in terms of where we are for Livingston Park, here are some of the things we're doing. We've built in a flexible intervention period in our master schedule. It's called WIN, stands for What I Need, and that's a small portion of the day, about 20 to 30 minutes, when students can move between different teachers on a grade level and receive targeted instruction in a particular skill, which is a very flexible way of designing short bursts of instruction that are more targeted to student needs. One of the challenges when you're a classroom teacher and you've got students who represent all of those 5 categories in your classroom is figuring out a way to design a lesson that can reach all of those kids where they are. It's got to be challenging enough, but also accessible enough. So what we're looking at is how do we make Tier 1 even better? So when we ask our teachers to do lesson plans every week, we're not asking them for the same things we've asked for in years past. We've asked them to prioritize and only focus on what do you need to do to this lesson to modify it, to make it accessible and challenging for each of those different groups. What does the lesson need to look like if you're learning English? What does this lesson need to look like if you have dyslexia? What does this lesson need to look like if you're a student who is hyperactive? How can we best engage that student? How do the students learn it? What are we going to do to this lesson that still maintains our curriculum, but makes it so that each of those students can experience it in a meaningful way? We're looking at our data teams to do a better job of tracking our data and design instruction around that. We're progress monitoring. during PLC time, which basically means that every week when the teachers meet to look at how the students are doing, they're making adjustments. They're not waiting until a test to decide that something worked or it didn't. We're adjusting along the way. We're looking at how we are using ELL and special education instruction. So for example, traditionally ESL students have received the support of an ESL teacher for science and social studies, as well as for reading time. We are experimenting with more of an inclusion-based model where the ESL teacher is in the classroom with the general education teacher for a greater part of the day, typically about half of the day at Livingston Park. And the design is to expose students to more ELL supports in non-traditional subjects so they can understand the nuances of things like a word problem in math or a sentence structure in writing. When we look at ESL, there's 4 different components of learning a language, right? Reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And typically what happens is the first thing kids do is listen and understand. That's why when you're in a classroom, ESL students for the first few months after they arrive to our country are often very shy, very quiet. The first thing they're mastering is listening to a language and understanding. So we're looking at how do we provide instruction that engages an ELL learner in those 4 components: reading, writing, listening, speaking, making sure they have opportunities to speak, making sure they have opportunities to listen, increasing wait time. All of those items are happening. In special education, we're paying special attention to the learning needs of each particular student. We're using characteristics of a philosophy called universal design for learning, which essentially creates a profile of each child and examines what type of learner they are. Do they learn through hands-on activities? Do they learn through interacting with another child and learning? Do they learn best in groups? Do they learn best musically, kinesthetically, by moving around and looking at those instructions? Our academic support program in the district has changed slightly. So typically students, for example, in language arts would get a program that would last for several months at a time, and it would encompass many different components of reading. Our program has now changed, so we're focusing on particular skills for smaller amounts of time. So instead of going to a program for several months at a time, our program is hyper-focused on a particular skill for 9 weeks at a time. That way we can be more intentional and more focused on how we are supporting students and get them more support as they need it. We are looking at our dual language program as we continue to expand that program, looking at the resources available for each grade level, evaluating the quality of those resources and opportunities to support those particular programs. Here's why that is so important. Many of the students in the dual language program, traditionally, if that program did not exist, would be our ELL students. And overall, the big takeaway for us at Livingston Park right now is the students in the dual language program are succeeding in a way that makes us very proud. And that is a contrast to the students who are receiving ELL services, who will continue to struggle on some of our standardized tests. So we're looking to bring out the best of both programs and identify how we can increase the amount of supports for students who are ELL students who may not be in the dual language program. So that's a little bit about what's happening at Livingston Park, and we'll talk more next month about other aspects of our school.
If you don't know, we have the conference meeting next month at Livingston Park. Thank you, Mr.
Dawson, I just
Dawson.
have one question about the WIN program, the scheduling. So if it's going to be 20 minutes during the school day, is that time already built in, or is this approach for next school year?
No, we've been doing WIN for past several years.
Okay.
So it varies between grade level. For some of the younger grade levels, kindergarten, first grade, it's 15 to 20 minutes.
Right, okay.
As the kids get older and their attention span gets a little bit longer,
They could do it for longer.
They can do a little bit more of a duration of a time. But
Okay.
it's designed to be flexible so that the teachers have the ability where if there's one teacher who's, say, really fantastic at teaching a particular skill and a child needs that, but that child is not in that teacher's class,
Right.
they can go into that class for that 15, 20 minutes and receive that instruction.
Wonderful.
So we're excited about it.
And one other comment is I really like the ELL inclusion model that you're piloting, I would say. It sounds like a wonderful idea. I hope that it bears fruit.
So far, so good. We're very fortunate. We have a very dedicated ELL staff who are very talented, so we're very excited about working with those teachers and those students.
And now Mrs. Whalen from Parsons School will be joining us.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm very excited to share our story at Parsons School. As we go through the NJSLA test results, as you can see, we fell in the level 3 for ELA 3, Math 3, and Math 4, and a level 2 in ELA 4. And I'll talk a little bit later about some things that we're doing in those areas. The one thing I'd like to draw your attention to as you have looked at these scores before, we do have work to do, but I certainly don't feel it's a depiction of what takes place at Parsons School each and every day with our students. As one of my colleagues has mentioned, it's simply a snapshot of one day of a test that's taking place. And when we take a look at the assessments that we give on a regular basis with our Linkit benchmark assessments, our Envisions program, and the different math assessments we do there, we are certainly seeing growth in our students as we move along. Unfortunately, with NJSLA this year, we aren't able to show you growth because we have nothing to compare it to due to the pandemic for the last 2 years. Where normally we can take you from year by year to show you the same cohort of students and how they progress, because that's really what we want to look at. We don't want to look at third grade last year and third grade this year because you're not comparing student growth. So in our minds, it's student growth that's most important. So we're really looking at the individual assessments that we're giving in the classrooms each and every day to make sure that we're meeting our students' needs and moving the needle and moving them forward. All right, so I know the font on this is a little small up there, so I'm actually gonna bring it up here as well, just because my eyes, as I get older,
Welcome to the club.
are not as good. Okay, so let me just get to Parsons. Here we go. So grade 3 ELA at Parsons, based on our test results, we found strengths in the nonfiction genre, identifying main ideas and key details, and also strengths in vocabulary across genres, specifically understanding the meaning of words and phrases in context. Some of the things that Mr. Dawson had mentioned were the same at Parsons School in terms of our dual language program, which we are very excited that it now goes through kindergarten through 4th grade, and thank you to the Board of Education for supporting that each and every year for us. So our dual language 3rd grade ELA outperformed their monolingual counterparts by 63% to 48% in meeting and exceeding on the NJSLA. So as Mr. Dawson had said, generally you don't see the progression or the advancement of the dual language students until at least they hit 3rd grade. The research shows it takes a good 6 years for that language base to be completely developed and for those students to show their true potential as they begin to outperform their monolingual counterparts. And one of the main reasons has to do with the critical thinking skills that they have to use in order to be able to learn 2 languages and process 2 languages. In terms of 3rd grade math at Parsons, our strength were in fractions. Standards were represented on a number line, which then allowed them to succeed in comparing the fractions. Also, they had strengths in measurement and data with analyzing graphs, area, attributes of shapes. I'm sorry, I want to step back one moment. Under grade 3 ELA, our special education students actually outperformed our general education students on the NJSLA, where they were meeting and exceeding at 27% and our general education at 18%. A lot of that, I believe, is attributed to the outstanding work our staff did last year and the year prior during virtual learning for our special education staff that met one-on-one with their special education students virtually and provided them individualized instruction for them to be successful. Okay, back to 3rd grade math. Again, our dual language grade 3 math outperformed our monolingual 57% to 55%. In grade 4 language arts at Parsons, our strengths were in summarizing grade level text, including identifying story elements, setting, and drawing on important details. And in grade 4 math, we had strengths in numbers and operations base 10, with understanding place value, applying it to comparing multi-digit numbers, and solving word problems across all 4 operations. There was also strength in applying operations to fractions, which is an extension of their knowledge of operations and whole numbers. When we take a look at our next steps, in terms of curriculum, as the rest of the district is doing, we are embarking on New Jersey tiered systems of supports, where we're going to monitor district benchmark assessments throughout the school year in data teams that will provide grade level intervention plans for Tier 1 instruction, as well as identify students for Tier 3 and Tier 2 and Tier 3 support. This will involve progress monitoring, instructional planning, and monitor growth to help to close the pandemic-related academic gaps. Cross-curricular embedded interventions throughout the academic day are a priority for us. When we look at the deficits that our students have, they just can't be addressed during language arts or during math. So we need to find ways to have that permeate through science, through social studies, through our SEL activities that we have. It'll become a normal part of their everyday, just small little snippets of practice items so that they can get those foundational skills so that they're able to progress. Our PLCs, our professional learning communities, are going to focus on data and planning instructions around trends. We're going to continue our weekly walkthroughs and coaching in order to provide support and strengthen our Tier 1 interventions. Continue morning math and achieve programs to provide additional academic support. And this year we're going to be doing, and thank you to the board supporting this, family book clubs for grades 2 through 4 at Parsons School. This is going to be an after-school program where we will provide families that would like to participate a book that they will read at home with their students, and then once a week for about 6 to 8 weeks, they'll come in for an hour after school and meet with a classroom teacher who will facilitate a book club discussion so that will help to encourage critical thinking and deepen engagement to improve students' understanding of text and transference of skills by making connections. It also helps to build on our homeschool connection, which I'll talk about shortly, which has been a huge endeavor at Parsons School to make all of our parents feel welcome in our school and that they are valued and that we want them to be a true partner with us. At Parsons, as I'm sure you know, with the demographics, we do have a huge ELL population. We also have a lot of students whose families are working multiple jobs. And really school is the place where all of the academic issues take place, because by the time, unfortunately, parents come home, it may be late and they may not have the time to, sit down with the students to go over homework, and it's often older siblings who may be, helping them, and we value all of that, any support that, they can offer, but it's our job during the school day to make sure that those academic needs are being met. So we also worked on culture and climate at Parsons last year, and we continue that this year. We developed a variety of committees to strengthen our school culture and climate through our mission and vision, utilizing our Parsons mantra. And I'm very proud of the results that we have received based on the surveys that we've taken of our staff at the school. So in terms of school-wide and community involvement, we've increased that by 38%. Our professional growth and resources were increased by 39%. Administrative and staff relationships have increased by 35%. And relationships and pride within our school have increased by 45%. And that was over last year at the end of the pandemic. We will be administering new surveys again this year to monitor that growth as we continue. But we feel that in order for students to be able to progress academically, for our staff to be the best that they can be, we need to make sure that the culture and climate is a positive, safe, and healthy environment for all of our stakeholders. And we start our day every morning with our Parsons mantra, which I've shared with you here, and it is done in English and Spanish for all of our students. And I'll just share that with you for a moment. And each of our students recite that at Parsons, I matter, I am kind, I am honest, I am positive, I show respect, I am part of a team, and trying my best leads to success. And that's what we focus on each and every day. And I'm very proud to say that our students and our staff are exceeding my expectations in terms of what's expected for them at school, and we continue to grow as one family. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Whalen. Any questions for Mrs. Whalen? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. J.D. Shorter from Linwood, 5th and 6th grade.
Good evening, everyone, and I'm just so proud and happy to be here, and just thankful for everyone who's here. I see a lot of my former parents and family, so it's good. So I'm going to forward here. Linwood School. So I've been at Linwood for 19 years, and I'm proud to say that we do good work here. Now that we're Linwood School, not Linwood Middle School, things have changed. It's the first, for a lot of our students when all the 4 elementary schools come together as one school. So it is a challenge in a way for a lot of kids because they're now meeting kids who they don't know. Even though I'm super proud of our school, I'm going to tell you right now, I am not proud of my scores. I am just not proud of what we did here. But as John said and Diana said, it is just a snapshot of a week, or maybe let's say 3 days, when kids had to sit down and take a test. And sometimes, as John said, you don't know what's going on in that kid's life. So he may have had a bad situation that led him not to do his best. But for me, I'm a silver lining guy. So what we need to do at Linwood School is to continue to improve our relationship with students. We need to continue to improve our instruction. And we need to make sure that our kids are confident so that when it's test day, they feel that, I am ready to do my best on this test. So that's something that we're going to continue to do at Linwood School. If you look at our next report here, the subgroups are all over the place. And we have some gaps that we know about. So again, we're going to do what I just mentioned to try to make sure that all of our subgroups are succeeding. So it's something that, again, in my time here, I'm going to dedicate everything I have to make sure that my kids are ready when they leave us and go to Rick, that they're ready to do their best and then go to Mike. Okay, so I'll go back here. So area of strength. I am really proud of our 5th grade and 6th grade ELA students with the leading of Kate Dwyer and Jen Denardi and all of our ELA staff that, they perform well in comparing and contrasting characters and settings of stories and determining main ideas in a text. So for a 5th grader, that's huge. For our 6th graders, they were able to identify vocabulary and context for fictional literature and analyze impact of specific word choices in meaning and tone. So from our little guys, it's something that they're doing good. We have some work to do, but this is what they're doing good. We're proud of them, and we're going to continue to try to help them to do their best. For math, students performed above the state mean and specific standard, and those domains are going to be in our numbers in base 10, geometry, and data. For 6th grade, students were on average, they performed 50% or above average in related number systems and standards. And being a math guy, I know that for some kids, they just mature at different times. And math kind of comes when you're maturing, is there, the math comes easier. When you're not as mature, the math looks difficult, but it's something that they're working towards. For science, our students performed across the science domain closely, followed the state trends in earth and space science, life science, physical science, investigating, sense-making, and critiquing practice. So these are things that we did well, and we're very proud of them. Next step for us are huge. Like a bunch of the other schools, or all the other schools, we are in the New Jersey tier systems of support. So we have put together 3 data teams, one for ELA, one for math, and one for behavior, that we are beginning to meet and come up with a grade level intervention plans for our tier 1, as well as identify students for our tier 2 and our tier 3. And we really think that this is going to help our students, because sometimes they're just not being serviced the way they need to be. So we are thinking that that's going to help us tremendously in identifying these students. Our PLCs will continue to focus on data to plan instruction around learning trends, because as we know, the learning trends change. And with our kids just coming out of COVID 2 years ago, the trends have changed. So we're going to really work hard on our PLCs. Regarding ELA, we're going to focus on transferring skills such as comparing, analyzing, inference from fictional text. For math, we're going to focus on domains of number and operations with fractions and operations in algebraic thinking. We will be offering after-school tutoring club for math and ELA that will also support their students, again, after school, what they're doing in their classes. With our new schedule, we have a flex ELA class that's called Skills to Grow as a Writer, and a flex math class that's called STEM Toolkit, where kids or students are able to use what they're learning in the classroom, but in a fun way, in a way that will interest them, because everyone doesn't like to just sit down and do what the teacher says. They want to do something fun. So these two classes are something that kids are enjoying and they're also learning, which is important. In science, the PLCs will continue to adjust instruction and provide professional learning, as well as teacher reviews of assessment information that was previously not released, such as sample test items. So, our kids will be able to see what they're going to see on that test day, which sometimes will help. When you know what's coming, you'll be able to review and be ready for it. The last thing is our climate and our culture. As Diana said, that's very, very important to us. Last year and the year before, we literally had 2 different schedules running for one school. So it was just, again, not ideal. But with our new schedule, everyone is on one schedule. The bell rings and everyone moves, not a bell ringing literally every 6 minutes. So that has helped us tremendously. And the last thing is, we're in the process of constructing and utilizing a new walkthrough instrument to analyze grade level trends and gaps that we know that we need to close up so that our kids are doing the best that they can. And eventually, as I said before, going to Rick and they're ready to go and ready to perform for him. I really think that's important because it just doesn't end at Linwood. We want our kids to grow and succeed and be the best that they can. So with that, I will say thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on up to 7th and 8th grade with Mr. Solover.
I'm bringing this because I'm not sure what I'm going to be able to read better. So. But anyway, thank you for having us, and thank you as always for your support. We certainly appreciate it at the middle school. At first glance, our scores were disappointing. At second glance, when you take a step back, of course they were. I'm going backwards. This is different from mine. There we go. Okay. So at first, again, our scores were not great. And when you take a step back and think about what students have been through, you start to think, well, of course they are. Maybe it's a minor miracle that they weren't worse, and that's a testament to the work that the staff did and the students did while they were home or in hybrid, all right, when it wasn't easy. I'm sure we could all get into a heated discussion about what grade level is the worst grade level to be at home for, right? I am going to say 7th and 8th grade, of course, all right? Of all years for kids to miss the structure of school, I would say that's the worst, but I'm sure you might disagree, all right? But no wonder why, all right? That's kind of how I would put it, of course. Right? There are some gaps we have to work on, we know that. There are some trends that were similar to what we saw with NJSLA prior to COVID. And some changes, some more drastic than others, all right? But we know that looking at NJSLA prior to 2019 doesn't do us a whole lot of good because of what the students have been through. But I wanted to look at data a little differently. And it's not slides. There we go. So the past 2 Septembers, we have taken another exam called Start Strong, okay? And I wanted to see if there was a way to look at that and compare that in September to what the students did in May. And if we can't use that data, then why do we take the test? All right? The first step to do that was to normalize or equalize the scoring, because the Department of Ed, NJSLA is scored in 5 categories and Start Strong is scored in 3 categories. So I had to try to level those off. And I reached out to Mrs. Chang and we came up with a formula that we thought made a lot of sense. I want to be clear that we created the formula before we looked at the numbers, and we didn't look at the numbers and then back it in, okay? When we do that, when we equalize the scores between the 2 exams, 8 months apart or whatever it is, we get a far more accurate picture of what happened when kids were back in classrooms full-time with teachers full-time. We see that 17 out of 18 categories saw growth. one of which stayed equal, and that was a category that was already proficient, so there was no change, okay? There was significant upward migrations of students who needed strong support up to some support, and from some support up to less support. Those were the three categories of Start Strong, okay? Some examples for you. We saw a 43% drop in students needing strong support in Math 7, right? We saw a 56% drop in students needing strong support in algebra, and a 66% gain in students who went up to the less support category for algebra, which is the highest category. All right, so again, tremendous growth in a short amount of time. We made up a lot of ground, and the last one, 20 to 23% drop in our ELA scores out of strong support. All right, so a lot of work, good work was done last year, and I will say, in a situation like this, direction is more important than speed. All right, and we're on course. That's the good news. Next steps, we have a new schedule, as you know, which is already paying dividends. If you were to walk the halls today, you would see a much better focus among students and staff. Okay, the schedule we have now much more lends itself to middle school instruction, right? And we're expecting that to pay dividends. It already is in a lot of ways, but in terms of instruction and test scores down the line, we are anticipating good things. We have intervention math and ELA classes, which we had had prior, but if you recall, we had the R&R period, which was like a morning study hall. Beginning in January, students who needed support in ELA or math would be placed in a different R&R from January to April to prep for testing, okay? Now, that is a class that is built into their schedule. They've already started, so we are already months ahead of where we are, or where we were a year ago. Our AVID program, we are in year 2 of that at the middle school level. As you know, it takes a while for AVID to take root, but we're already seeing a different product this year than we did last year. Last year, we were really kind of getting our feet wet. Give you an example, just yesterday, they took a trip to Drew University, right, which went very well. And, you know, AVID is, again, for kids who may not always have a clear vision of what's possible and what's out there for them if they just engage a little more, all right? They had a great trip, and they learned a lot. They were treated to a lunch and came back and said, why can't we have that food? Sorry, because you don't pay 40 grand a year to go here. Anyway, we've expanded our AMP program, which is our algebra manufacturing program. That's in year 3. It's really our first true year in year 7, and in 7th grade though, all right? The good news is the jump in the algebra scores, a lot of that comes from AMP. So we can safely say that that program is doing its job, okay? And introducing kids to algebra who might not have been in it otherwise, okay? 2 tutoring programs are returning, lunch periods with our Honor Society students and after school with teachers. We too have data teams where we'll be analyzing data and looking at Tier 1 interventions. Some of our pre-existing clubs, Homework Club and Operation Achievement. Operation Achievement was kind of a precursor in our building to AVID, okay? Again, kids who are on the cusp could be doing better, just need a little bit of support, all right? So, and the Homework Club is really just a quiet place with teacher support for kids who may not have that at home, all right, once a week. We have rebooted our mentoring program where students who could use another pair of eyes in the building have an adult in the building that they work with, all right? We're already seeing that paying off. And I'll just say that the reacclimation work continues, all right? You know, it's gonna take a while to scrub out any damage that occurred during COVID. We continue with our wellness surveys to check on our SEL situation. We really focused on climate and connections this year and making sure that kids feel like they belong back in school. We've rebooted our PBIS program. You might have heard the phrase Rate or Ready. That's our thing now. And we're trying to undo some of the apathy that may have set in with kids just being home too much or for too long and just became disconnected from school. Okay? That's my story. Any questions?
No?
Thank you, Mr. Slover. And finally,
Thank
you're
you.
bookending our presentation tonight, Mr. Neller.
So I'm going to begin with Rick, and I will say that last year, many times at the high school, and Sam, you may remember, I felt like I had a 7th grade and an 8th grade and an 11th grade and a 12th grade. Because the maturity levels had changed because of being home for as long as students were. But just like Rick is saying, we are all seeing a drastic change in the students this year. I now feel like I'm in a high school again. And we really have seen that change. And I will say that our math teachers and our English teachers are saying that the freshmen that came in this year are were much better prepared for learning than the students who are coming out of COVID and coming back into the building. So we're excited we're hopeful that will translate into our test scores improving as well. So as I mentioned earlier, we tested a lot at the high school last year. We started off with Start Strong in September. We had NJSLA, and then at the end of the school year, we had AP testing, NJGPA, and then we also had the science test, which was the very last test that grade 11 students took last year. And we truly believe that a lot of our result of our science scores are because of student apathy. They were just exhausted. Even our higher level students, many of them are coming out of taking AP tests. Our science supervisor told me she would go into classrooms and they just did not want to take that test. And we encouraged them as much as we could, but I do think that testing, the amount of testing they were subjected to last year did have an impact on kids. But overall, we were very pleased to see that our students in geometry and algebra 2, they exceeded the state cut score for proficiency on average. Especially our algebra 2 students, they really, you can see they knocked it out of the park. And I do attribute that a lot to maturity. They're older students, generally they're juniors, some sophomores, some freshmen, but I do think their maturity levels were higher last year, and that can attribute to how high they scored on the Algebra 2 assessment. So what we saw as well in looking at the Start Strong data from the students who tested in September and then tested again for NJSLA is that we found that 40% of grade 9 ELA students identified as needing strong support. When taking the NJSLA assessment, only 13.3% of those students showed no improvement. 83% of Algebra 1 students were identified as needing strong support. On the spring assessment, only 31% of them did not improve. In geometry, 66% were identified as needing strong support. And on the spring assessment, and you can see our average scores exceeded the state average, only 7.5% did not improve. Algebra 2 students exceeded the state average for a passing score, 4 or 5, which is the passing score on NJSLA. And some other time we can get into a discussion about how 3 should be the passing score, because it is for AP testing. But the state holds students to a higher standard than the College Board does for some reason. 63.5% of MBTHS students passed with a 4 or 5 on the Algebra 2 assessment, and compared to 53% statewide. In addition, total score, we exceeded the state average for Algebra 2. So those are students who may not have passed, but they still built up our average, so we did exceed the state average for total score for Algebra 2. Our next steps, when NJSLA was given to students in the fall for science, they tested seniors. Many of those seniors didn't even have a science class last year because you're only required to have 3 years of a science. So we had students taking NJSLA, Start Strong, and their data did not help us prepare the juniors who were going to be tested in the spring. So that's another reason why I don't think our students scored as high. Our science teachers also, until this school year, were never allowed to see samples of what the science test even looks like. Math teachers have been able to do that for a while. So this year, the state did release what the test looked like last year for students, sample questions from that test. So our science teachers are currently building that into their instruction, making sure they're exposing students to the type of questions they're going to see on the NJSLA science test this coming year. Again, MBTHS teachers are reporting that students in Algebra 1 and Geometry are already showing better understanding of mathematical concepts after being back in the school for a year. Math teachers continue to infuse NJSLA practice into their lessons. And we have, our PLCs are continually working to make sure that every teacher is infusing those strategies into their lessons. And then as the other principals have mentioned, we're going to be using our NJTSS data teams to develop school-wide interventions. So students teachers in social studies will be looking at ways they can support English teachers and making sure the students have the skills they need to be successful on NJSLA and ELA. And science teachers are going to be supporting math teachers for the math tests that students will be taking later this spring. So with that, thank you very much.
Any questions for Mr. Neller? Any comments? I'd like to take a minute just to thank all the principals. This was a lot of work to prepare for this, and we did a practice at our principal meeting as well. And, you know, just being able to have you come here and share with us the real story of your schools, I think is an important piece of sharing out this test data, right? It's not just isolated data about a student that, right, you're right, it's like a snapshot. You're telling us the big picture story of your school, the hard work that your staff has been going through since the pandemic to support our kids through the pandemic, and now coming out of it, both socially and emotionally. Obviously, that one-on-one, being with other students in person, being with teachers, is so important to our students and to our staff, and learning happens by being engaged in a social environment. So all those pieces are important. Your passion and excitement and all the different pieces that you're putting in for your students, we can see that, and we really appreciate your time and effort tonight, so thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Liguori, can you take item number 6, please?
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to approve the following board minutes: the conference and regular public meeting from October 19th, 2022, and the executive meeting also from October 19th, 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes have been accepted.
Thank you. Any communications?
No communications this evening. I do have my administrative report.
Yes, please.
Good evening to all our families, guests, and viewers here tonight. Congratulations to our Board of Education member who was re-elected on Election Day on Tuesday, November 8th, Ms. Colleen Keefe. Congratulations to our newly elected members, Zaire Ali and Jason Carter, who will be sworn in during our reorganization meeting in early January. In our continued effort to keep our schools safe through the winter cold and flu season, we will be distributing 2 COVID-19 antigen tests monthly to all students and staff in partnership with Miramis and the New Jersey Department of Health. The district's winter concerts will be held in the high school auditorium at 7 o'clock on the following dates: December 5th, Judd School; December 8th, Parson; December 13th, NBTMS; December 15th, NBTHS; December 19th, Linwood; December 20th, Livingston Park; and December 22nd, John Adams. And those are a fun time to see our students perform and showcase our musical talents. All schools and board offices will be closed Thursday, November 24th and Friday, November 25th for Thanksgiving. And don't forget the school is closed for half a day on Wednesday, November 23rd. And as we head into Thanksgiving, I would like to express my gratitude to the entire North Brunswick Township educational community, our students, staff, and families, and our Board of Education. Your efforts to make this a positive and supportive school environment for our students and to prioritize learning and growth, both academically and socially, make a difference. Please accept my sincere wishes for a sincere, safe, and happy Thanksgiving. Thank you, Mr. President. That's it.
Thank you. Any student reports?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So, starting off yesterday, Tuesday, November 15th, the student government sponsored our fall blood drive. We had 69 units collected. We turned at least 20 people away, and total 207 lives helped. So it's on the smaller side, but we usually have a bigger turnout in the spring because the juniors, a lot of them will turn 16, and a lot of the sophomores will turn 16, and more juniors will turn 17. So we do expect a bigger turnout in the spring, but this was still a pretty good turnout for the fall. And then second, actually going on right now, the SGO is sponsoring our annual powder puff competition. That's where Matt is right now. Wanted to make sure you guys knew he wasn't just skipping. All 4 grades are anxious to see who will take the championship. Probably going to be the seniors, but that's going on right now. And then third, the Alchemist Fall Show will be held on this Friday and Saturday in the auditorium, November 18th and 19th. The theme is How to Survive High School, and tickets are $10 for students and $15 for adults. The National Honor Society is also collecting winter apparel items such as hats, gloves, socks, scarves, and coats to donate to the Salvation Army. All items must be new with tags on them and can be dropped off at labeled boxes in the main office. And lastly, the Key Club is doing a fall and Thanksgiving food drive. They've collected a lot of food, boxes and boxes, to donate to the North Brunswick Food Bank for Thanksgiving. But that's all, Mr. President.
Thank you. And I know our committees have not met recently, so we'll have them report out at our next meeting. Ms. James, can you take item number 9, please?
Sure. I move to approve the administrative, student, and committee reports.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All the reports are accepted.
Thank you. At this time, we'll have a review of the rest of our agenda. We're currently on page 2. So we'll look at page 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8, 9 and 10, 11 and 12, 13 and 14, 15 and 16, 17 and 18, and 19. At this time, we will have a public session on agenda items only. If you have any comments or questions for the board, this is again on agenda items only. We ask that you come to the podium, sign in, state your name, and comments are limited to 3 minutes. Seeing that there are none, may I please have a motion to close the public portion of the meeting?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This session is closed.
Thank you. Dr. Patel, can you take item number 13, please?
Sure. I'd like to make a motion to approve the following consent agenda items: personnel, curriculum, miscellaneous, finance items 1 to 3, and transportation.
Second.
Mr. Brockman?
Yes.
Mr. Duran Harris?
Yes.
Ms. James?
Yes.
Ms. Keefe?
Yes.
Mr. Legori?
Yes.
Dr. Patel?
Yes.
Mr. Wen?
Yes.
And Ms. Zoll?
Yes.
All the motions have been accepted.
Thank you. At this time, we'll open to public session on any matter. So again, if you'd like to address the board, any comments or questions, we ask that you come to the podium, sign in, state your name, and comments are limited to 3 minutes each.
Hi, everyone. Most of you know who I am. If you don't, my name is Melissa Rossman. I'm a former resident, former employee of the Board of Education, and a mom of 3 North Brunswick students and a wife. So bear with me, I'm not a public speaker. I just wanted to bring some things to the...
Sorry, excuse me, if you could hold the mic. Yes, but if you could hold the mic too, so we can make sure we...
okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I stand here tonight in support of Kelly and Nicole, who, like me, experienced a less than favorable job environment while working in the business office. I was hired in October of 18 for the benefits secretary position. I will spare everyone here and the public the disgusting details of my experiences and all the uncomfortable situations that occurred during my time there. I can promise you that it was not a good experience, which Kelly touched on last month, and I couldn't agree with her more. As for Kelly's statements at last month's board meeting, my unpleasant experiences were very similar. To say the least, the environment was hostile at best. As a mom of 3 and the wife of a police officer, how did I allow a job to bring me to tears on numerous occasions and affect me so negatively? But when you spend 8 hours a day with a bully, and that's right, I said bully, you do the math, and yes, it was not easy. I stayed in my position for 14 months because I'm not a quitter and I needed my job. But once I found a better situation, I resigned immediately. I also want to mention the person who was the bully in this situation. Again, I use that word, and I think you all know why I use that word. She was promoted. My main reason for speaking to you tonight is to first apologize to Kelly for not being as brave as her when I left the board office in 2019 as she was last month, bringing the situation to light. There were 3 women after me that experienced the same things we did, and finally Kelly had enough nerve to speak up. I cannot thank her enough for her bravery. She did something I couldn't do. Although I did say something more than once, yet still, here we are. Everyone knew what was going on, but clearly looked the other way, because it didn't affect them. Would we look the other way if a child was being bullied in the school all day? I don't think we would. I'm not sure what my comments here today will achieve, or if they will have any effect on the future situations at the business office or at the board office work environment for that matter. But I am finally able to stand here and say what I experienced out loud, and it feels really good. It's been a long time. So I thank you, and I just want to wish you and your families a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
And I'm not an angry person. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nicole Boulay-Keisher, and I worked at the Board of Ed from February 2015 to November 2021. For the first 5 years, I loved working here. I had a boss who was fair. He wouldn't let anyone talk to one another with an attitude or hostility. I came to work enjoying what I did, and I was praised on my work. Anyone knew they can count on me. I went the extra mile for anyone and never gave them the cold shoulder. Over the past 3 years, we received a new business administrator and new business office manager. The business department during that time had 5 employees resign. 5. Think about that. And I was number 4. I spent over a year and a half dreading coming to work every single day. I dreaded the moment I walked in because it was never welcoming. The air was filled with this thickness, and it wasn't just me, but people couldn't breathe. I'm sure none of you would like to come to work where you can't ask a single question, where you're told to ask someone else, where you have to text your coworker from across the room, because God forbid we help one another. Helping your coworker is something I do every day, but here you're made to feel inadequate and blatantly stupid. If I asked a question, I was told to refer to my notes. I was told to call Systems 3000, and I was told, it's easy, figure it out. I reached out to my direct supervisor, the BA, maybe 4 to 5 times before I left, and nothing was ever done that lasted more than a few days. It was as if my concerns were of no merit and glazed over. Towards the end of my time there, I even wrote to her, addressing my mental health concerns. I asked her for help, and I told her I was scared. She sat there in front of me when I brought it up again in person, because my email, of course, was never addressed, and she welcomed me with a smirk and didn't even try to help at anything.
Excuse me, when you are discussing a particular person, I have to warn you that you can be held personally liable for defamation should you go across the line.
Mental health is no joke, and I was falling fast and hard. Nothing was ever done to fix how people were treated. I sought therapy for what I was going through at work myself. If this company wouldn't help me when I had given them about 6.5 years, they were never going to help. I became extremely depressed and had no smile left in me. And when I went home, I wanted to sleep all day or just cry. I knew I had to make a change, not because of my job, but because of the people who treated me and other 4 others with hostility. It is not right when we should have to dread coming into work. We should not have to get our own therapist because of intimidation we face daily. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to grow. I have a bachelor's, a master's, and a New Jersey certificate of eligibility because I continued going to college and furthered my education.
Time's up.
Can I finish?
Do you have much more, or?
No, but my husband can finish for me.
That's fine. Yes, that's fine.
When coming to work here, I was made to feel.
I'm sorry if you.
stupid.
I'm sorry, sir. If you don't mind just stating your name, please.
Ed Keisher.
Thank you.
Thank you. Feel completely stupid by how I was spoken to. how my concerns were pushed to the side and how asking for help was the hardest thing any of us could ever do. It was very convenient how when some people made an error, it was easily correctable. But I made a mistake and was told by my boss, Nicole, you never mess with someone's kid or someone's money. This person clearly insinuated that I was purposely doing something, but again, when I asked questions, I was pushed to the side.
Again, I will also have to advise you that should you cross the line into defamation, you can be held personally liable.
He's not mentioning no names.
It doesn't matter if it is identifiable.
No defamation.
I gave all of that up to be happy. The board needs to know the truth about what happens on a daily basis. They need to know the whispers and the treatment of their employees. If nothing is done, we will not be the last 5 people to leave. Taking a management course does not change the type of person you are. That is deeply rooted in your personality and work ethic. I am an alumni of North Brunswick. I am a taxpayer of North Brunswick. I am previously an employee of North Brunswick, and my children go to North Brunswick. It took a lot for me to leave and now come here and tell all of you what the truth is. I hope you take what we say and make a change because they answer to you, not the other way around. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Superintendent, board members, and guests. Once again, my name is Kelly Montgomery. I'm here again, this time with Nicole and Melissa, who experienced the same treatment as I did, working in a hostile work environment. It was very unfortunate that all of us have encountered these experiences while working in the business office. The business office manager harassed.
Again,
degraded-
I will raise the issue. I will make this exact same comment, that you can be held personally liable should you engage in defamation.
Correct. The business office harassed and degraded every single one of us. Many were aware, including the business office, but nothing was done. We faced depression and fear every time we walked in to the Board of Ed. Today makes my 1-year anniversary that I would have been working at the Board of Ed. The Board of Ed Education prohibits act of harassment, intimidating, or bullying. As per your website, it is part of the core beliefs and values of the district to provide a place where everyone feels safe and accepted and has a sense of belonging. The district, the school anti-bullying, specialist students, parents, and community will work in collaboration to prevent and eradicate all forms of harassment, intimidation, and bullying through education and the establishment, maintenance of policies and programs. This is not only for students, but this is for staff. It is odd to think how many times this position was filled, and the question didn't even spark anyone's mind, but today it will. Our voices shall be heard. This matter, very important, unacceptable, and today we will seek answers and people will be held accountable. We are the example of the beginning, the middle, the end. But understand, there's still people in between us. I'm going to close this with a quote. That old law about an eye for an eye leaves everyone blind. The time is always right to do the right thing, by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I hope everyone has a happy Thanksgiving. See you next month.
Thank you. Is there any other comments? Seeing that there are none, may I please have a motion to close the public Sorry.
Mr. President,
yes.
may I make a
Yes,
comment?
yes, absolutely.
For the board. The board, and I want to call the board's attention to your board policy 1530 and your board regulations 1530. It deals with, it deals with equal employment opportunity, and it is their complaint procedure. There is a complaint procedure that is available for all employees. It has a multi-step process. It begins with your immediate supervisor. It goes to the affirmative action officer in writing. If that is not satisfactorily resolved, it goes to the superintendent. If that is not a sufficient resolution, it then is able to be appealed to the board. So the board, in fact, does have a process that is in place in the event there are allegations of hostile work environment, which has a very specific meaning. But this board does have a process in place for any employee to bring matters up, go through the channels, follow the chain of command, and present it to the board.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? All right, seeing that there are none, may I please have a motion to close the public portion of the meeting?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The session is closed.
Thank you. At this time, we'll be going, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we will, sorry. We'll be going into closed session. Whereas Section 8 of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, PL 1975, permits the exclusion of the public from a meeting in certain circumstances, and whereas this public body is of the opinion that such circumstances presented exist, now therefore be it resolved by the North Brunswick Township Board of Education that the public shall be excluded from discussion of and action upon the hereinafter specified subject matters. The general nature of the subject matter to be discussed is as follows: negotiation matters. It is anticipated at this time that the above stated subject matter shall be made public at such time as the need for non-disclosure no longer exists. This resolution shall take effect immediately. May I please have a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We may go into closed session.
Thank you.
Did I see you send it?
Thanks. May I have a motion to return to open session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are back in open session.
Thank you. And I believe we have a motion, a resolution?
Yes, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion to approve a sidebar agreement between the North Brunswick Township Board of Education and the North Brunswick Township Education Association for the 22-24 contract agreement relative to Appendix A1 of the salary schedule.
Second.
Mr. Brockman?
Yes.
Mr. Duran Harris?
Yes.
Ms. James?
Yes.
Ms. Keefe?
Yes.
Mr. Legori?
Yes.
Dr. Patel?
Yes.
Mr. Wen?
Yes.
And Ms. Zolik?
Yes.
This motion has been accepted.
Thank you. And then finally, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a great Thanksgiving, everyone.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes, thank you. You too, everyone.
I know.